Time travel is one of the most used resources in science fiction. Whether you're traveling in a DeLorean at 88 miles per hour, stepping into a cave, through the quantum realm, or in a phone booth with the intention of composing the rock song that will save the world, there's something particularly appealing about this concept of time travel. In a way, it means having the opportunity to correct mistakes and make decisions that we couldn't at the time. However, these journeys bring many contradictions and paradoxes. The most popular paradox is the so-called grandfather paradox. That is, what happens if you travel to the past and kill your grandfather? Something that theoretically would not allow you to be born. Travel to the past and kill your grandfather. In this video, we are going to take time travel very seriously, and I'm going to tell you how different theories solve this paradox, how we can link time travel with the philosophy of determinism, and finally, why it seems so difficult to alter the course of history through the theory of chaos and the strange attractor. So get comfortable and get ready to take time travel very, very seriously.
Go! The Geek Monitor!
Chapter 1. Temporal Paradoxes. The movie Back to the Future presents us with a different version of this so-called grandfather paradox, but it works in an equally effective way. When Marty McFly travels to the past and accidentally prevents the event that causes his parents to meet and fall in love, or, well, prevents the event that makes his mother feel so sorry for his dad that she ends up marrying him, he changes the past, and in theory this should immediately prevent Marty's birth, which in turn would prevent Marty from traveling to the past to stop this event, which already creates a paradox for us. However, this does not happen, as within the movie, changes in the timeline seem to take a bit longer to appear. That's why Marty and his siblings disappear slowly and dramatically from the photograph instead of doing so immediately. This device is also used by the series Legends of Tomorrow, a DC Comics series that talks about time travel, in which changes within the timeline also take time to establish. This device gives both Marty McFly and the Legends enough time to correct the timeline and ensure that everything ends happily, as the focus of these two stories is not to take time travel too seriously. It's simply a device they use to tell an interesting and fun story. But what happens with other stories that take the concept of time travel more seriously? Other stories get around the grandfather paradox with the concept of alternate timelines. An example of this type of story can be seen in the anime Dragon Ball Z in the Trunks saga, where he travels in time and alters the past, but he does it within another timeline. That is, even though he saved Goku and defeated the androids in the past, his future is still as messed up as before. The same happens in the movie Avengers Endgame, where the heroes have to recover the Infinity Stones from the past to be able to use them in their future instead of just killing baby Thanos, as War Machine says. At first glance, it seems that this resource of alternate timelines tries to avoid the grandfather paradox with an easy solution. However, physics seems to be on their side. It turns out there is a phenomenon called quantum superposition, in which an object can possess two values at the same time, something that happens in the real world with electrons, and that Schrödinger introduced us to through a possible cat killing with this mental exercise of the cat that is alive and dead at the same time. So this means that androids could be alive and dead at the same time. However, these examples so far only tell us about one type of time travel in which the traveler changes the timeline due to his journey. But there is also another type of time travel where the time travel was always part of the timeline. This is the case presented to us by the series Dark, a story where time travel was always destined to happen. In this series, several characters travel to the past with the intention of changing events and stopping the apocalypse, not knowing that it is precisely their time travels that end up causing it to happen. This solves the grandfather paradox, as all events are part of a loop that is always destined to happen. However, it also seems to bring with it another paradox called the Bootstrap paradox, We usually think of time in a linear way, that is, past events are the ones that affect the future. However, stories like Dark present us with the idea that our future can alter the past, which makes our future the origin of our past, something that is very well exemplified in this image. Because of this loop, the series presents us with a book about time travel that technically is never written, because the person who supposedly writes it always receives it from the future already written. In fact, something very similar happened to me with this video, as one day I was wasting time watching kitten videos on YouTube when suddenly... Giovanni, I'm your future self. I've come to leave you this notebook with a script for your new video and the mathematical formula to be able to travel to the past. It's well structured, it's perfect,
and it smells like lemon.
Let's see, wait, are you coming from the future to deliver me a video script? Didn't it occur to you to go to China to properly cook the bat? It's just that I can only travel a few days into the past, it's not like I'm a great physicist. However, it's very important, you have to make this video. Now I must go. Hey, wait! At least tell me if the video is going to do well. Is it going to get a lot of views and plays? Or is it going to die in oblivion? I wouldn't want to spoil the surprise. No?
Would want to spoil the surprise.
Hey, dude, jerk! This means that technically I never wrote the script for this video since I received it from my future self. And when I finish making this video, well, I have to time travel to deliver it to my past self. But what happens if I don't want to do it? Do I even have that option? Or am I destined to fulfill my role in the timeline, just like the characters in the Dark series? Well, it turns out that philosophers have already asked something similar. Chapter 2: Fate and Determinism. In the story of Harry Potter and the Prisoner of... Harry is saved from the Dementor's kiss. At first he believes it is the spirit of his dad, but later in the story, when he travels back in time to save Sirius, he sees himself in danger, so he decides to save himself, thus completing this temporal loop. Here the question is, does Harry have the freedom to choose something else? It's a fact that we feel free. That is, we all think that we make our own decisions. If you're watching this video, it's because you want to. And if you subscribe to my channel and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any notifications from my videos, it's also because you want to and not because I'm asking you to. But seriously, it would help me if you subscribe. However, determinists don't completely agree with this. Determinism is a philosophical theory that tells us that everything that happens is determined by an unbreakable chain of cause and effect. In other words, if Biff Tannen doesn't pay attention to the road and crashes into the truck, then the consequence is that Biff will end up covered in manure. So far it sounds like something quite simple. However, there is a branch called strong determinism that has a much more radical viewpoint, as it says that there are no random acts in the universe, that Biff will always be destined to end up covered in manure. This unbreakable chain of fixed causes and consequences, what we could call fate, is something that has disturbed the human being for thousands of years. So it's a recurring theme within time travel stories, but we can also find it in much older stories like that of Oedipus Rex. A Greek story in which an oracle tells a king that his son Oedipus is destined to kill him and marry his mother. The king, in an attempt to avoid this, decides to take baby Oedipus to the forest to die. However, a couple finds him and raises him as their own, without telling him that he was found. When Oedipus grows up, another oracle tells him that he is destined to kill his father and marry his mother, so Oedipus decides to flee from his adoptive parents. This eventually leads him to kill his biological father and marry his biological mother. If you notice, all the characters fulfill the prophecy by trying to run away from it. A conflict that is known as man versus fate or man versus God. Stories of man versus fate like Oedipus or Dark tell us that we really can't fight against destiny. In fact, in the Dark series, the protagonist Jonas knows what his future is. The same happens with the character of Dr. Manhattan in Watchmen. However, neither of them can do anything to change it because their decisions are always exactly the same, which tells us that we are really not free. The question is, why does this happen? According to determinism, the decisions we make are caused by invisible factors that occur in our brains, such as our beliefs, desires, and personality. When you combine these three factors with a specific situation, it results in us making a decision, just one. So, according to this stance, even though we may feel very free, all our decisions could actually be predictable. So, does that mean it's possible to predict the future in real life? A mathematical theory suggests that yes, it is possible. Chapter 3. The Theory of the Strange Attractor. Observe this pendulum. If you notice, it has a predictable movement, and with a mathematical formula, we could calculate the acceleration of the pendulum and predict how much it moves. Now observe this double pendulum, which already moves in a way that seems unpredictable to us. In fact, even if you release exactly the same pendulum, apparently in the same position, the small variations will cause the pendulum to move in a completely different way. The double pendulum then is a small demonstration of how a chaotic system works, in which a tiny variation gives us a completely different result, something that relates to a phenomenon that you have surely heard of, the famous butterfly effect of mathematician Edward Lorenz. The most traditional way of talking about the butterfly effect is through an allegory that tells us that something as small as the flutter of a butterfly can cause a tornado on the other side of the world through a series of events, causes, and consequences. But since we're talking about time travel, I think I like the way Grandpa Simpson puts it better. And
if you ever go back in time, don't pick up anything, because the smallest change can alter the future in ways you can't imagine.
so Lawrence discovered that in a chaotic system like the double pendulum, small variations at the beginning give us completely different results. However, he also discovered that this chaos has an order, but we don't see it at first glance. It seems incredible, but when you plot these chaotic elements, whichever you want, you start to see how over time some patterns appear, which he called strange attractor. Let's say you find a trend and a shape behind the chaos. This tells us that, despite there being large variations in a chaotic system, in the long run, the strange attractors will make the outcome the same. That is, you can take two different double pendulums, launch them at different speeds, and if you plot them, you would end up having the same shape, which speaks to us in a certain way of a destiny that cannot be altered, like throwing a stone into the river. That is, of course, it will have an effect, but in the long run, the river is a chaotic system that will follow its same course. In fact, astrophysicist Igor Novikov seems to say something similar in his theory about time travel, as according to him, time travelers could not cause a temporal paradox. There would always be situations that would prevent it. Maybe that's why Marty McFly always manages to save the day. We can also see this particularly in a scene from Dark where a character discovers that his weapon doesn't work and therefore he can't fire it because this would cause a paradox in time. However, when someone else takes the weapon, it turns out that it works perfectly. All of this tells us that life is a chaotic system much more complicated than the double pendulum, but that it is still a deterministic system, that is, it is governed by the laws of cause and effect. And the conclusion of this can be terrifying, as this philosophy tells us that we are doomed to be slaves of a pattern that was determined, that just like the characters from Dark or Dr. Manhattan, we would be doomed to make the same mistakes even though we knew what they are, without being able to do anything about it. However, linked theories such as the butterfly effect can also give us another point of view, in which something extremely small, like the flutter of a butterfly, can have a great effect on the course of our lives. Perhaps in the long run, these big changes seem small, to such a degree that they seem insignificant in the face of the immensity of time, because the human being is insignificant in the face of the immensity of time. But I think the trick is to look closely. Get so close that the small changes still look huge, and trust that everything will take shape eventually.